I don't really know where to start. I've already deleted and rewritten this post about 10 times because it sounds too absurd even to me. But if I don't get this out, I think my head will explode. Or maybe something worse. My name is Jake. I'm 25 years old. I live in a small town in the countryside. The kind of place where rumors become solid truths just because no one has much to do besides repeat them. Here, everyone has heard about the endless Hitchhiker game. It's almost a local rite of passage, a dumb courage test that teenagers do on boring nights, usually after a few warm beers and empty promises of money, women, and fame. But don't be fooled, it's not just a legend to scare kids into not taking dad's car. I know that better than anyone. This game took from me what I held most precious. First my brother, then, well, you'll understand. Please, if you ever hear about this challenge, if some friend brings up the idea like it's just a joke, don't go. No matter how much they doubt you or laugh at you, no matter how tempting it is to test the unknown. This game is a bottomless pit, and whoever gets close to the edge ends up slipping, sooner or later. My brother Noah was 2 years older. He had that kind of energy that lit up the room. He talked loud, laughed easily, had an annoying habit of tapping people lightly on the shoulder when he wanted attention, like the world was a natural extension of his body. I idolized him as a kid. He took me biking to the lake, taught me to play pool, covered me up when I woke up crying from nightmares. But when I was 15 and he was 17, something between us started to crack. I was the studious youngest one, he was the young pragmatist with gasoline in his veins. We had silly fights that grew like mold. That fateful week we had a stupid fight. I wanted to use the car on Saturday to go out with some friends, but Noah showed up in the kitchen saying he needed it that night. We argued and he snatched the keys from me, running out the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, already at my limit. "To play the game," he said. "If I win, I'll buy my own car, and you won't have to share anything with me, kid." That hit me the wrong way. I shot back without thinking, almost spitting the words out. "Do whatever you want, Noah. I hope you go and just disappear already." Those were the last words I said to my brother. He left, slamming the door, laughing loudly, and never came back. They found the car 3 days later, parked on the shoulder miles away, engine running, doors locked from the inside, no sign of him, no sign of struggle. Just the radio, tuned to empty static, and the passenger seat wet, like someone had sat there after coming out of a lake. Now, about the game, here's what you need to know. The endless Hitchhiker has no clear creator. It just exists, floating in the collective imagination of this town for at least 2 generations. I remember hearing about it when I was little, waiting for the school bus. An older kid, chewing gum loudly, said he had a cousin who tried it, disappeared for days, and came back mute. Another one swore that a classmate's dad won a fortune after playing, but started sleeping in the basement, saying the light hurt his eyes. Later, when the internet became everywhere, the game got new life. Anonymous posts would pop up in weird forums, the kind you open at 3 in the morning, with a black interface and ads for illegal meds and married women in your area. They had titles like, "I did the endless Hitchhiker challenge. Ask me anything. The passenger asked me something I can't tell. There is no prize, only debt." Almost always the thread would just stop out of nowhere, or the author would post something incoherent days later, like they had a little literary stroke. Later on, printed copies started appearing. Someone would type the rules on an old machine or print them on cheap paper, sticking them to poles on Main Street, near the school, the movie theater. Yellowed papers, wet with dew, taped with electrical tape. I read one of those sheets myself when I was about 13. I kept it inside a biology book, forgot about it for years until I found it again, after everything had already happened. I still remember it almost word for word. The endless Hitchhiker challenge. 1. Go alone or bring someone willing not to interfere. 2. Choose Highway X17. Don't use GPS, don't bring maps. 3. Drive at night, no destination, until you see the first sign that says slow down. 4. Stop the car and wait. Don't get out. 5. Offer a ride to the first who shows up, no matter who it is. 6. Obey all instructions from the passenger. Don't ask where you're going. 7. Never look back when the passenger gets out. 8. If you reach the end, they'll leave something in the car. Don't open it until you get home. 9. If you try to leave early, you'll walk forever. Back then, I laughed at it. Told my friends that whoever disappeared on the road must have crashed drunk and gotten lost in some thicket, or used the superstition to run away from parenthood or something like that. But it's easy to be skeptical when nothing affects you directly. After Noah disappeared, I spent years with that stuck in my throat. My mom withered away. Our dad too. But in his own way, he'd spend long stretches silent in the garage, staring at the tools, working on the car, his face wet with sweat or tears. I never could tell which. I carried the weight of what I'd said to my brother like a tumor. Some days I'd catch myself repeating it under my breath. I hope you go and just disappear already. The subtle cruelty of how careless I was when I said that fed on me reminded me all the time that maybe it was the last thing he heard from my mouth. And the worst part is Noah left laughing. He left thinking I didn't care. Little by little, life arranged itself the way it does when the chaos is too big to process. I started working IT at a small local shop, where I spent more time swapping broken mice and rebooting modems than programming anything at all. I met Maya in one of those rare moments of human interaction, a backyard party, questionable drinks, bad music. She was the kind of person who barged into my routine without asking permission. She laughed at my dry jokes, grabbed my hand on our second date, and never let go. She was loud in the right way, complained about the price of coffee and the state of the world with the same vibrant indignation. And little by little, she made even Noah's memory hurt a little less. But to forget completely is impossible, especially here, where every corner seems to whisper old stories, where the echo of rumors never really dies. The endless hitchhiker kept showing up, the inevitable zeitgeist, a poorly done graffiti on the wall of the old gas station, scribbles on a school desk, a silent reminder that, sooner or later, someone would want to try again. When Maya started hearing about the game, it was a friend of mine who bragged about knowing the real rules. She thought it was hilarious. She spent days nudging me, saying we should try it, just to prove it was all drunk nonsense. Before you judge her, I hadn't told her about Noah. At least not everything. I told her about my brother, about how close we were and how he disappeared, but no mention of the game or anything like that. Maya was a big city girl. I figured she'd see these small-town legends as just backwater superstition. In a way, I was right, but she genuinely thought it was a fun and curious idea. "Imagine, Jake," she'd say, leaning on the kitchen counter, swirling her half-empty glass. "You and me facing the myth. When we get to the end, I want my prize. $1 million or an endless milkshake." I'd laugh awkwardly, change the subject, but she kept insisting with that spark in her eyes I hadn't seen since before Noah disappeared. A spark that mixed curiosity and challenge, like the universe was just a board waiting for her to flip the game. Until I gave in, said we'd do it my way, following every rule to the letter, no fooling around. Deep down, maybe part of me wanted to confront it, to face the same road my brother did, and, maybe in some crooked way, understand him. In the week leading up to that day, Maya was electric. She made a playlist for the trip, full of silly songs that got stuck in your head, bought snacks and energy drinks to celebrate our victory over the supernatural, as she put it, and even packed an old camera she'd inherited from her grandfather, to capture the moment we bust the myth. I watched her with a strange mix of tenderness and a dread that seemed to settle deep in the pit of my stomach. Sometimes, in the middle of her jokes, I'd catch myself smiling in an almost automatic way, while inside, I kept recalculating the risk, measuring how much I was willing to sacrifice just to keep that spark in her eyes alive. The night before the big event, we slept together at my apartment. We didn't have sex, not that time. We just lay there, our legs tangled, trading silly confessions. Maya said her biggest fear was abandonment, so she didn't want to go alone or let me go alone into this. I knew where that fear came from. I laughed, kissed the top of her forehead, and promised I'd always be there by her side. She took my hand and traced imaginary lines on my fingers until she finally drifted off to sleep. I, on the other hand, stayed awake long after, staring at the ceiling and listening to the intermittent hum of cars outside. I wondered if Noah had done the same, if he'd lost sleep the night before, if he was scared, or if he was truly brave. A stupid thought crossed my mind, almost pulling a nervous laugh out of me. What was Noah's biggest fear? When the sun rose, we got up and prepared everything with ritualistic exaggeration, gathering supplies like we were heading to war. Maya brushed her hair twice, because what if ghosts care about good presentation? And I checked the tire pressure as if that would protect us from any hungry entity. Before we left, she pulled me close and gave me a long kiss, without her usual rush. If we win the prize, I promise to share it with you, even if it's just the milkshake, she said with a crooked smile. How generous, I joked, but my chest tightened in a strange way. The drive to Highway X17 was quiet, the kind of comfortable silence full of small certainties only two bodies used to each other can have. Maya tapped her fingers on her knee, watching the scenery slide by through the window, and I focused on the asphalt, trying to ignore the fact that the world seemed just a bit grayer than usual. In the background, low, some pop song from her playlist played like white noise. When we finally spotted the faded blue sign marking the exit for X17, I felt my heart give a stupid jolt, like it was about to drop. Maya noticed, squeezed my thigh, and said in an almost sweet tone, "Hey Jake, let's not make this a big deal. It's just a road. Just a bunch of concrete and white lines." I forced a smile, and with that, I turned onto the highway that seemed to stretch out infinitely ahead, swallowing our car and, though I didn't know it yet, swallowing me too. The X17, I don't need to explain this is a made-up name, since I don't want any of you to try this, had a curious way of imposing itself. It wasn't wide, it didn't have potholes or creepy signs, but it felt too quiet. There was no movement, no trucks, no headlights coming the other way, not even many streetlights. The asphalt stretched effortlessly, lazily winding through dark pine woods where the wind rustled the treetops but made no sound at all. It was like we were in a completely sterile, controlled, almost laboratory-like environment. We drove for a good 20 minutes in that suspended state, Maya making occasional comments about the playlist, about how the car seat smell seemed worse at night, about the strange color of the moon rising, stained yellow. I answered with grunts or tight smiles. The truth was, my body was so stiff, my shoulders ached. Then, without warning, the sign appeared. It wasn't big, painted in faded yellow, black letters half worn off. But there it was, solemn and inevitable. Slow down. Maya took a deep breath, let out a nervous giggle, and squeezed my thigh even harder. I eased my foot down, felt the car protest slightly. The engine gave a low groan, like it disliked this as much as I did. "This is it, right?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper but trying to sound playful. "This is it." I pulled the car over onto the shoulder. The engine still purred, restless, the speedometer needle twitching slightly like it didn't want to settle completely. Inside, we were suddenly left with nothing to say. Maya reflexively fixed her hair, looked in the side mirror. I, meanwhile, kept my eyes glued to the rear-view mirror, watching the strip of road disappear into the darkness behind us. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. That's when I saw the first movement. A dark silhouette appearing, as if materializing out of nothing and shadow. It walked slowly, unhurried, steady steps, hands hanging by its sides. As it got closer, the low beam headlights lit up a worn-out suit, a crooked tie, and an old-fashioned hat, the kind you only see in old movies. Maya gripped my arm so tight I felt her nails pierce through my shirt. The man reached the passenger window. He stood there, head tilted slightly to the side, like he was studying a painting in a museum. Then, slowly he bent down until he was face to face with the glass. The car's interior light flicked on with the movement, revealing a long face, ashen skin, and eyes set too deep, shadowed by almost black circles under them. He smiled. It wasn't an evil smile, it was terribly ordinary. Somehow it reminded me of the kind of smile my grandfather used to give. I don't know what came over me, but I did what the rules said. I unlocked the doors. The handle turned without a click. The man got in, sat down next to me, turned to Maya with the same smile, and shut the door in an almost ceremonial silence. She shrank back instinctively but kept her chin up, eyes fixed on the windshield. For a moment, no one said anything. Then the passenger took a deep breath, as if he wanted to savor the air in the car, and spoke in a low, hoarse, oddly polite tone.
"Keep going, please. I'll tell you when it's time to turn."
I just obeyed, feeling sweat break out on my forehead despite the car's air conditioning. My hands were damp too, making the steering wheel slightly slippery. I didn't dare look at my passenger, but I knew he was watching me, the fear crawling up my spine like prey, stalked by its predator. I could only hear my own breathing, too heavy, mixed with the persistent hum of the engine. I glanced briefly at the rearview mirror, hoping for some sign of headlights in the distance, any proof that the rest of the world still existed beyond that stretch of road. But there was only the compact darkness, so dense it almost felt solid, like it could be cut with a knife. Maya cleared her throat. I don't know if it was to break the silence or to clear away a fear she couldn't quite hide. The passenger then rested his hands on his knees. Long, thin fingers, nails short and far too clean for someone who looked like he'd crawled out of a grave. He turned his face slightly toward her, keeping the same focused stare. I didn't look at him directly, but I could see out of the corner of my eye the precise, restrained, almost meticulous movement.
"Bless you, miss,"
he said, tipping his hat in greeting. "Thank you," Maya whispered. I could hear the fear in her voice. I didn't want to leave her like that, so I tried to shift the focus off the man by asking a question. "So, where are you from?" My voice came out weak, in a tone I didn't even recognize as mine. The passenger turned his face toward me, so slowly that for a moment I feared he wouldn't stop. When his eyes finally met mine, I felt an involuntary tightness at the base of my stomach, as if something small and cold had coiled itself there. He held my gaze for a second or two, long enough for my heart to pound out of rhythm. Then he smiled again, this time in a way more threatening, more true, his teeth worn down and slightly conical. And he said,
"Oh, I come from many places, but for now I'm only going where I need to."
I didn't know what to say. That seemed to close off any chance of more conversation. I had the dumb instinct to glance at Maya, searching for some hint of shared understanding, like I might find in her eyes a silent joke to break the weight of that moment. But she stayed rigid, her hands clenched in her lap, gripping the fabric of her pants like she was trying to anchor herself to something solid. The passenger settled deeper into his seat. For a moment, he just watched the road ahead, body leaning slightly forward, as if he were contemplating a landscape far beyond what my eyes could reach. Then, without changing his calm tone, almost too polite, he spoke.
"At the next turn on the left, please."
I nodded, swallowed hard, and kept driving. The road seemed to bend at an impossible angle, almost an exaggerated arc, dipping through trees so dense their branches met above the asphalt, forming a kind of natural tunnel. The car entered that suffocating half-light, and for an instant the world seemed to grow even quieter, as if the engine were holding its breath along with us. "Jake," Maya murmured, her voice a faint thread. Just that, but it was enough to make me want to let go of the wheel, pull her out, and run until our lungs burst. Instead, I just looked at her and tried to say the only thing I could. "It's okay," I lied. "It'll be over soon,"
It's about to begin,
corrected the passenger, in an almost distracted tone, like someone commenting on the weather. I felt the blood drain from my face. The road stretched on in near absolute silence, broken only by the low growl of the engine and our uneven breathing. Maya was squeezing and releasing her seatbelt in a nervous tick, while the passenger watched the black forest scenery outside with the calm of someone admiring a familiar garden. Then he turned to her, so suddenly that the seat creaked under the shifted weight.
Tell me about your mother, Maya.
The air seemed to thin, as if the question had pulled something vital out of it. Maya's eyes widened a little. She blinked several times. Her hand found my arm, gripped it tightly, but she said nothing.
Please,
he continued in a polite tone.
I love family stories.
Maya took a deep breath. Her knuckles went white as she clenched my sleeve. She was great, funny, most of the time. She liked loud music. Her voice faltered, turned into a brittle whisper. But she had problems. Said she needed it to forget. I didn't want her to forget me too. The passenger's eyes glimmered with something I can't name. A silent pleasure, maybe. He tilted his head, so slowly the motion seemed to belong to some other creature, not a human being.
So the fear of being left alone came from her.
It wasn't a question, but Maya nodded anyway, her chin trembling. I wanted to tell her to stop, to give him no more of that fear, but my throat closed up, like it was full of sand.
At the next bend, pull over,
the passenger said, turning his gaze back to the road. I obeyed, feeling my heart pounding so hard it seemed to push my ribs out of place. I hit the brakes. The car shuddered. The road there was wide but lined with twisted pines, their branches hanging low like deformed arms. The passenger pointed to the side of the road without even looking at me.
Maya, dear, look outside. I think someone's waiting.
Maya took a while to turn her head. First, she bit her lip, took a deep breath. Then, with the slow, reluctant motion of someone who fears what they'll find, she looked out the window. I looked too. I couldn't help it. Between the trees, something began to take shape. It was as if the darkness condensed into vertical, elongated lines and then filled out, gaining form. First came legs, far too thin, then a narrow torso, almost translucent. The arms hung long, bending at an odd angle, the hands dragging across the carpet of dead leaves. The head. God. It was far too large, the face long, the skin almost clinging to the bones. The hair fell in damp, oily strands, sticking to its cheeks, partly hiding the eyes. Two deep, frantic hollows that darted in their sockets, as if trying to fix on everything at once. When the face cleared, I wanted to hit the gas. It was a sickly version of Maya's mother. I'd seen her in photos before. We didn't talk much about her because, after Maya's father died, she'd drowned herself in drugs and within a few months vanished. That's where Maya's fear came from. But the worst part was when the mouth opened, too wide, and a sound came out. It wasn't a scream, nor a word. It was like a wet sigh, sucking in too much smoke, trying to speak between coughs. "Mom," Maya said, in a trembling whisper, her hand instinctively reaching for the glass. The creature stretched its neck, so thin it looked like it might snap. Then it started to laugh, a wet, broken sound, through lungs full of fluid. Beside me, the passenger just let out a satisfied sigh.
It's time to move on,
he said, resting his cold hand on my shoulder again.
Or we'll miss the gift that's waiting for you.
I pulled away almost with a jump, the tires skidding on the damp asphalt. As we drove on, I looked one last time in the rearview mirror and saw the long figure bending to follow us with its eyes, its mouth still open in that horrid smile. Maya shrank into her seat, hiding her face in her hands. The passenger began to whistle. the uneven sound filling the car with a kind of music that didn't belong to any safe place. And I just kept driving, hands locked on the wheel, praying there really was an end to this. But that last sentence he spoke worried me. The man carved his words into my mind. What would the gift reserved for me be? If Maya's was this terrible encounter, would mine be? And yes, that thought crossed my mind. Would I find Noah? Or maybe be confronted by my greatest fear? I felt a chill thinking about it and couldn't help looking at my girlfriend's hands, clinging to my shoulder, trembling. The car stayed quiet for a long stretch, but not with a peaceful silence. It felt like it was building up inside the vehicle like thick smoke. I didn't dare break it. Neither did Maya, who was still practically glued to me, her face half buried in my shoulder, breathing too fast. Then, without warning, the passenger slightly tilted his head in my direction again.
You think about him a lot, don't you?
I didn't need to ask who he meant. Noah's name seemed to echo inside me, even without being spoken. I tried to answer, but my throat only made a rough, half-choked sound. The man just smiled, this time with lips stretched so thin at an angle that didn't belong to a human face.
Interesting how you humans carry so much weight for words thrown to the wind, as if a mouth had more power than blood.
He looked back at the road, settling back into the seat again. But I couldn't let out my breath for a long time. His emphasis on the word human pounding in my head, that now tried to figure out what kind of being he really was. My hands tightened around the wheel until they hurt.
Up ahead there's a gas station. Stop there,
he said in a casual tone that made me hate him more than any threat ever could.
Let's stretch our legs.
I tried to protest, but nothing came out. Maya looked at me, eyes wide, silently begging me not to do anything stupid, so I just nodded, almost mechanically. Minutes later, the station lights appeared up ahead, half dead, some flickering too slowly, like bulbs dying out. The sign said shop and gas, but the S at the end was burned out, so it just read shop and gas. The nearest pump was dripping fuel in an irregular rhythm, creating little black puddles on the concrete. I parked near the convenience store, fog covering the whole ground and the horizon. The passenger opened the door slowly and gestured for me to get out too.
Come, I need you inside.
I looked at Maya, who squeezed my hand even tighter. Don't leave me here, Jake, she whispered. I won't, I promise, I lied, with no idea what was waiting for me, but deep down I think she knew. I stepped out with trembling legs, the passenger at my side, almost setting the pace of my steps. The store door opened at his touch, ringing out with a long metallic chime that didn't sound like any bell I knew. Inside, the shelves were lined in narrow aisles, generic products, yellowed packaging, and a stubborn smell of mildew. The man gave me a look full of expectation and started walking through the aisles, disappearing among rows of expired chips and old magazines. I followed him, my stomach in knots, feeling like each step pulled me deeper into that sluggish white light. The fluorescent lamps buzzed loudly, some flickered, casting shadows that squirmed in the corners of the ceiling like they were alive. The floor creaked under my shoes, stained with little dark smudges, maybe oil, maybe dried blood. I wasn't sure anymore. The passenger moved with absurd ease, like he knew every shelf in that place. He stopped in front of a row of dead freezers, the glass fogged up inside, and ran his index finger along the metal top, leaving a clean line through the dust. Then he slowly turned to me.
Pick something, Jake.
What? My voice came out hoarse, almost cracking. I was so tense I felt something pop in my back when I straightened up.
Anything. A simple gesture. A gift from you to me. You come to me wanting something, don't you? Well then, I want a souvenir too.
I looked around. It made no sense. Everything there seemed too old, too forgotten to matter to anyone, let alone that thing talking so politely, like a customer waiting to be served. But something in the way he looked at me, patient, yet with a flicker of hunger behind his eyes, forced me to obey. My eyes scanned the shelves with difficulty. Nothing there seemed real. The packages looked more static than actual objects, like stage props in a poorly built play, just waiting for the next scene change to dissolve. My hands were shaking so much I had to press them together. I passed dented cans of unbranded soda, opaque packages that didn't say what they contained. Everything felt out of place, wrong. Then I saw something. At the back of one of the shelves, almost hidden behind a pile of moldy candy, there was a small plastic figurine. A little green toy soldier, the cheap kind, with half its face deformed, maybe melted by time or some old heat. One arm was missing. The ragged stump looked like it had been torn off. Still, it clutched a tiny crooked rifle in its other hand. My fingers grabbed it before I could think better. It was light, fragile, almost warm. I felt a sharp sting run up my hand, and when I looked, I saw its tiny plastic edges had split the surface of my palm, rupturing small capillaries that now bled tiny drops. I ignored it. I went back to where the man was. He was waiting in front of the freezer, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, contained. When I held out the toy, he took it delicately, pinching it between his thumb and forefinger. He brought the toy closer to his face, examined it. Then he smiled. This time it was a genuine smile, almost happy, which made it 1,000 times worse.
A simple gift, but it carries something important.
What? I asked, before I could stop myself. He didn't answer. He just slipped the toy into his suit pocket and started walking back toward the door. I had no choice but to follow, my body obeying as if it were attached to invisible strings. As we crossed back through the silent aisles, I noticed some packages seemed to tilt slightly toward me, with no wind to justify the movement. The floor felt stickier, clinging to the soles of my shoes, releasing a pungent, almost sweet odor that made my eyes water. When we stepped out, the cold night air was almost a relief. In the car, Maya was still curled up, staring fixedly at nothing, her eyes wide and glossy. When she saw me, she let out a small, tense sob and reached out her arm for mine. I laced our fingers together, squeezed tight, mostly to reassure myself that she still existed there. The passenger got back into the seat next to me without a word, settling in with that almost ceremonial care. Then he tapped the dashboard once, a gesture almost affectionate, like he was congratulating the car for bringing us this far.
Now, Jake, keep driving. We're almost there.
Arriving where? I ventured, my voice hoarse, shaking. He just tilted his head to the side, smiling.
Keep going.
I obeyed. My hands found the wheel, and before I realized it, the car was moving again, devouring the road that seemed to stretch out on its own, the hypnotic pattern of painted lines slipping under the vehicle as we drove further and further away from home. The landscape changed. I don't know when it happened, but I realized the trees were gone, replaced by rows of poles without wires, each with a lone lantern hanging down, casting circular pools of light onto the asphalt. Between them, only darkness. As we passed under each lamp, I felt a brief warmth on my face, like a tiny sun. The passenger stares out the window. Sometimes he whispers things I can't understand, maybe not even in English, or maybe they're not words at all. Certain syllables leave a ringing in my ear, a small throbbing pain. Then he starts to hum. A slow song, no clear melody, just spaced notes, almost childlike. Maya shudders every time he starts the cycle again. I try to squeeze her hand as comfort, but my own fingers are stiff, almost numb.
We're close. You're going to love seeing old friends again.
I see flashes of my family back when everything was calmer, happier. Laughing at the lake, my brother kicking water at me, our hands rough from endless pool games, the way my mother would shake out her wet hair. All of it crossed by the final memory of our father's car parked, engine running, radio hissing. The car starts to slow down on its own. I look at the speedometer. The needle wavers, drops, even though I haven't touched the pedal. I try to brake, but the pedal gives no resistance. It sinks too easily. The passenger only smiles, staring out the windshield like he's watching a private show. Then I see it. Up ahead, a dimly lit structure. Looks like an old cargo yard, the kind where trucks park overnight. There are lights strung on precarious wires, forming a large square of brightness in the middle of nowhere. Inside it, silhouettes stand still. The car rolls into the yard without my command. The lights flicker, revealing human shapes scattered there, all facing us, faces hidden by the shadows cast by the bulbs themselves. They look like they're waiting. Maya starts crying softly, her body trembling. She tries to curl up even more in her seat. I try to pull her closer, but I can't move my arm. It's like the seat has grabbed me, holding me there. The passenger leans forward, satisfied. He taps the dashboard twice, like a signal.
Ready? Now let's see who shows up for you.
Minutes or maybe hours passed with the car parked there, engine still rumbling in a deep growl. I lost any sense of time. It could have been the whole night, or just one long minute. The passenger, satisfied, just stared ahead, drumming the dashboard with meticulous nails. Then he opened the door, the sound of metal scraping, cold wind invading the car. The man stepped out calmly, adjusting his wrinkled suit jacket, tapping his hat lightly against his leg, as if brushing off invisible dust. Then he bent down and looked at us.
Come, it's time to meet with certain important figures.
My body reacted before my mind had any chance to protest. My hands let go of the wheel. I unbuckled the seatbelt almost without noticing, felt the seat push me forward with an almost organic click, like the car was cooperating with him. Maya stepped out behind me, reluctant, her face marked with the trail her tears had left on her cheeks. Outside, the air was heavy, damp, smelling of wet earth and gasoline. The hanging lights swayed slightly, following the howling wind. The figures were closer now, forming a wide semicircle around us, motionless. Some stood in crooked poses, heads tilted, arms hanging in the air like marionettes. The passenger made a wide gesture with his hand, almost theatrical, and then, from the shadows beyond the light, something began to move. At first, I only saw a tall, staggering shape. Then, thin legs, dark jeans stained with something that might have been oil, but I suspected was something else. When it stepped under the weak light, my stomach turned inside out. It was Noah. I had always wondered what it would be like to see him again. My mind drifted through so many scenarios. Maybe one day I'd find him again. He'd explain it was all a misunderstanding, that he just wanted to run away from home or something. In those fantasies, I always imagined myself crying, but now, I couldn't show any reaction at all. Not even the smallest one. Half his face was deformed, his jaw twisted as if it had been pushed inward and had nowhere to settle. The left eye was just a dark cavity, swollen around the edges, the color of an old bruise. The other eye stared at me, small and lifeless. His right shoulder ended in a rough stump. No arm. The torn shirt there hung like a morbid flag. He stopped just a few steps from me, his chest rising and falling too fast, air wheezing through misaligned teeth. "Noah?" The sound came out almost childlike, like I had regressed years in fear and guilt. "It's me, Jake." The corner of the lip still intact lifted, forming something that might have been meant as a smile, but there was no warmth in it. He tilted his head slightly, his neck cracking far too loudly. The sound made me flinch. The passenger clapped his hands, satisfied.
Look at that. Family reunions always warm the heart, don't they?
"Jake, I think we should..." Maya started pulling me, trying to drag me back, but the passenger grabbed her wrist with a false gentleness. She widened her eyes, her chest heaving as he leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear, but the effect was immediate. She went rigid, her breathing stuck, and she let go of my arm like she'd been shocked. The man then guided her a few steps back, closer to the other motionless silhouettes.
She stays with me now. I need to make sure you cooperate.
I tried to move forward, to protest, but Noah jumped in front of me in a grotesque lurch, his torso bending too far, his foot thudding heavy on the cracked ground. His remaining hand grabbed my shoulder with disproportionate force, fingers too long digging into my flesh. He leaned so close I felt his breath. It smelled of rotting meat mixed with something metallic, like old blood. The eye that was still there studied me with a terrible calm, almost curious, while my knees struggled to keep me upright. Then Noah spoke, his voice a mix of hiss and growl, forcing its way through broken gaps in his face. "Come." The hand squeezed my shoulder harder and I lost my breath, a hot pain radiating across my back. Before I could resist, he yanked me with brutal strength, making me stumble toward the car. The passenger watched the scene with a slight tilt of his head, his eyes gleaming like he was witnessing a carefully rehearsed show. As Noah shoved me into the passenger seat, I felt the full weight of what this meant. And I knew, somehow, that this still wasn't the end. But it was so much closer to it. My last glance was at Maya, who was crying again now. Noah started the car, pulling her from my sight. I flinched when he slapped my shoulder like he used to do, but now it hurt absurdly more. I looked at him again and that smile was there, more alive than ever. "Now it's my turn to take you for a ride, little brother." Noah had pushed me into the passenger seat with a strength that didn't match his single arm and crooked bones. He got in on the driver's side and settled in naturally, pulled the seat back, tested the wheel with one hand, started the car like he'd done it his whole life. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd driven through that same hell when it was his turn. The road swallowed us again. We left that freight yard behind, heading down something that stretched out from there, with curves too smooth, almost numbing. The lights came and went, rhythmic, hypnotic. I sat frozen, tense, terrified that this Noah at the wheel would throw himself at me, or drive us off a cliff or something. But I think the way it actually happened shook me much worse. For a few minutes, Noah was just my brother again. He spoke like he used to, gave soft little laughs, slapped my shoulder the way he always did, the thing that used to annoy me but now, somehow, felt comforting. "Remember when the old man almost killed us for breaking the truck's side mirror? You swore you'd lie for me, but you gave it all up in 2 seconds. I laughed, a nervous, half-sobbing laugh, but it was a laugh. I was a kid, Noah. I didn't know how to keep a secret. You know he could be scary when he wanted to. He laughed too, and that was almost a bomb. Until... Yeah, you cried so much he felt sorry for us. He took us to the lake to make up for it, but you dropped Toby in the water, remember? You screamed that he was gonna drown. The laugh died in my throat. Toby? Yeah, that yellow lab they gave us for Christmas. His name was Rex, Noah. Oh, you know I was never good with names. Besides, you were the one who named him that... You, Noah, you named him Rex. He went quiet. He turned his head toward me, taking his one good eye off the road to stare straight at me. The smile stayed on his face for a long moment, like a loose mask. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. The eye blinked in a little involuntary tick. "Ah," he said, the voice more guttural now, thick with something viscous. "Right, good old Rex." My stomach turned over. I shrank back, pressing against the door, my hand fumbling for the handle, not even sure what I'd do if I got it open. My hands trembled too much to grip it properly, and the only sound I managed was a weak, "What are you?" Noah let out a sound that started like a laugh, but ended in a deep hiss, like air escaping a shriveled lung. Then he turned the wheel too sharply. The car veered off the road, plunging into brush so dark it felt solid. Branches slapped the windows, scratching like claws trying to get in. I screamed, tried to grab the wheel, but Noah, or whatever it was, shoved me back. It was so hard my head slammed into the dashboard. I saw stars. The world went muffled, like I dunked my head in a bucket of water. The glove compartment popped open with the impact, and from it, the little toy soldier fell out. I hadn't noticed when the passenger left it there. When he saw the toy, Noah screamed. I saw smoke rising from his skin as he shielded his face with his hands like a vampire shown a crucifix. At last he started gurgling and coughing. I could hear something scraping in his throat. Rising up, his windpipe stretching. By then, I was already horrified enough when he vomited up an amorphous mass onto my lap. It looked like some kind of octopus, twitching its long thin arms, limp and sticky. I screamed as I threw it out the window. The car lost control, shaking through the brush, headlights sweeping over tree trunks that seemed to shift, almost flinch away from the path. The dashboard flickered with red warning lights. The engine groaned like a wounded animal. "Jake, Jake," Noah said, his voice wavering, but before he could say anything else, the car completely lost its line, spun out, the world turning into a smeared painting of black and brown. There was impact. A dull crash, metal crushing, glass shattering. The seatbelt bit into my chest so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The sharp smell of fuel filled my nose. When the car finally stopped, flipped over, or just mangled too far to move, I couldn't really tell. Everything went so quiet I thought maybe I was dead. I unbuckled, dropped awkwardly onto the dented roof, and crawled out through the broken window. The ground was cold, damp, dead leaves sticking to my sweaty skin. Noah lay on the other side of the car, his body twisted at a painful angle. For a second I thought he was just another empty shell, but then he moved, coughing loud. "Noah?" My voice came out thin, ragged. I crawled to him, pressed my hand to his narrow chest. "It's me, man. It's Jake." His eyes opened slowly. This time there was nothing hungry or wrong in them, just fear, pure fear. "Jake, what was that? What was inside me?" He started crying, short sobs, almost like a child. I held him against me, even with the sour stench of blood and gas. I ran my hand through his hair like I used to when we were kids, when Dad was yelling and we hid in our room. "It's okay, Noah, I'm here." Of course it wasn't okay, but it was the only thing I could say. I could feel his body shudder, each sob shaking bones that seemed too fragile to endure. The smell of gasoline was overwhelming, made me nauseous, but I wasn't going to let him go for anything in the world. That's when I heard a sound, something wet, something that didn't belong in the forest around us. A hiss that quickly turned into a crack, like something being twisted. I pulled back just enough to see what was happening, and I wished I hadn't. The thing Noah had spat up, or whatever verb you'd use for that, was a few yards away. It looked like a gray, viscous lump pulsing on the ground, trembling, inflating and deflating as if it were breathing. Then it started to grow, to stretch, projecting thin tendrils that slowly lengthened, first touching the ground, then rising like deformed legs. I tried to pull Noah away, but his legs gave out, and his weight nearly took me down with him. "Come on, Noah, get up, man, please." But the monster was already rising, tall, slender, a cylindrical trunk that swayed as if testing the wind. On top, something that resembled a head, featureless, just a cluster of fissures opening and closing, exhaling white vapor. One of the tendrils came too fast, wrapping around Noah's waist. I grabbed his shoulders, dug my nails in, but felt his skin slip under my fingers, slick with blood and sweat. "No, no, no!" I was screaming so loud my throat burned. Noah looked at me, eyes wide, his lower lip trembling, and all I could say was, I don't want you to disappear, ever again." A cruel, horrible, inverted echo of our last meeting, but it didn't help. My fingers slipped, and Noah was yanked backward with force, his body twisting as more tendrils wrapped around him. His scream was cut off abruptly, swallowed by the dark, both of them vanishing into the murk beyond the halos of the streetlights. I stayed there, collapsed on the damp ground. The world seemed distorted. The trees stretched and shrank like figures in a cracked mirror. Everything was buzzing. I don't know how long that stupor lasted, but I just remained still, trying to process the shock of it all, letting my joints rest, if only for a moment. Finally, I stood up, not sure how. My feet carried me back to the road. I walked without thinking until I saw the glow of hanging lights. The courtyard from the start, now brighter than ever, full of figures standing still. In the center, there they were, the passenger, hands clasped behind his back, with that small smile that seemed reserved just for me, and Maya, standing next to him. Her face was too pale, lips parted like they wanted to say something, but nothing came out. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears that never fell, just sat there trembling. I wanted to run to her, but my legs stiffened. The passenger raised a hand and pointed, almost lazily.
One of you goes back, the other stays. It's the last rule, Jake, the end of the game.
My head was shaking no like it was involuntary, repeated 1,000 times. No, don't do this, please. You already took my brother. He tilted his head, raising his eyebrows with false compassion.
Ah, Jake, there's always room for one more on the road.
It was Maya who broke it before I could even think straight. She stepped forward, her hand resting on her chest. Jake, I always told you I was afraid of being alone, but I'd feel worse knowing you were stuck here. I'll stay. She tried to smile, the saddest smile I've ever seen. No, I'll stay. I'll be the one to stay.
Too late, Jake. She was faster,
the passenger said, almost with delight in his voice. I reached for her, but the space between us seemed to stretch impossibly. Maya turned slowly and walked toward the passenger, who extended his arm, placing that cold hand on her shoulder. The figures in the shadows parted, and there at the back I saw it. That parody of her mother, staring at her with eager eyes. Maya stopped at the edge between light and shadow, looked back one last time, silently. Our eyes stayed there, locked on each other. I understood her fear, the fear of being abandoned. My hands trembled at my sides, and I swear I'd rather face that monster from before than lose her. It was the same pain as losing Noah, the same guilt. The courtyard, the lights, the figures. It all disappeared suddenly. I was alone on the empty road, the distant sound of crickets and wind like nothing had happened. I snapped back inside the car, the radio hissing static. The engine was running, the key still in the ignition. I looked around expecting to see the passenger in the seat next to me or Noah popping up from the back seat, or God, Maya, but there was only silence and a faint smell of mildew. I don't know how I managed to get home. My arms and legs moved on their own, like I was a puppet. I regained awareness when I was lying on my bed, daylight filtering through the cracks in the curtain. I slept, a heavy sleep, dreamless, my body finally giving in. When I woke up, it was night again. I went to the garage, wanted to check the damage on the car, head to the station to report Maya missing, but as soon as I entered, I saw something inside. On the passenger seat, a small box, black, polished, like a perfectly wrapped gift. I picked it up with trembling hands, felt the weight, denser than its size should allow. I opened the lid slowly. Inside there were 2 little figurines, a green toy soldier, identical to the one I handed the passenger at the gas station, but this time whole, without the broken arm, and beside it, a small plastic ballerina, her face painted with a delicate blush. At the bottom of the box, a thick piece of paper folded neatly. I unfolded it. The handwriting was large and sloppy, almost childish in its exaggerated loops. You can only pick one, Jake. The other stays with me. I'm still sitting here, the lamplight trembling, the figurines lined up on the table waiting. My hand grows heavy every time I try to touch one of them. I don't know who I should bring back. I don't know if I even can. But time is running out. I feel the wind outside turning too cold. I think they'll want an answer soon. And honestly, I'm seriously considering getting in my car, grabbing the X17 and slamming my foot on the pedal until I reach that sign, until I find that passenger, until I get to that damn place again.